we're going to get going. I have 2:01 p.m. Eastern Time in the US. So I want to welcome everybody to another 9 and 9 Overtime UDL 3.0 Insights focused on higher education in particular. It's sponsored by the Goodwin University's Institute for Learning Innovation and our Center for Teaching Excellence, which is an excellent center. We're really thrilled to be here today. For those of you who have been with us on multiple occasions, and for colleagues around the US and beyond, Goodwin University is located in East Hartford, Connecticut, and it is a fully open access university. And in 2016, we adopted Universal Design for Learning as our pedagogy. And coming up on 2026, we will have been at this for 10 years. So we're very excited about that. Uh, During this session, again, if you would stay muted, unless Caitlin, our presenter, asks you to unmute, use the chat. My colleague Rob Legary has been putting some links in the chat, and we will continue to do that. We have people from all over, so it's very, very exciting to see everybody here. I'm really thrilled. The next slide to announce, well, maybe I will if I could manage my screen. Oops. Um, we are launching a new podcast at Goodwin. They are quick, probably less than 5 minutes, based on tip sheets that we have created with the aid of generative AI. And these tip sheets will be loaded to our Goodwin website, the Goodwin Institute for Learning Innovation. We have another set that's currently up there that is based on UDL 2.0. And this is with 2024, with the release of 3.0, we've decided to update them and make it even better. If you prefer to listen, there'll be quick podcasts to listen. So, Rob, thank you for putting the website in the chat. And Rob, if you have it, you could put the link to the podcast. Otherwise, I'll try to grab it later so people could hear the first episode. So we're very excited. There's a tip sheet. There'll be the UDL podcast. We're also going to do something similar, probably a little less produced for students that will line up with these higher education focused faculty tip sheets. So we're very excited. Kind of a 10th year anniversary product. So I am exceptionally excited right at the beginning. My niece and nephew went to George Washington University, and our presenter is from George Washington University today in Washington, D.C. in the U.S., and that is Caitlin Savadelli. And Caitlin is an accessibility instructional designer there at George Washington. And she's going to share with us today, discuss how using UDL sort of beyond just like checking, I did this, I did this, I did this, and how we can use it to align the why of classroom with the how of presenting information. She's going to present some general guidelines. As an instructional designer, this is her bread and butter, as we like to say. A little bit about Caitlin, as I said, she is at George Washington University in Washington, D.C., here in the U.S., and she designs and delivers training and resources for faculty, staff, and students that promote best practices around inclusive and accessible instructional materials. She's a certified project management professional, holds a master's in educational technology leadership from GW, and we're really excited to have her here today. This, again, as I said a bit ago, this is, the time of year when people are busy, and we welcome everybody who made the effort and is here today, and for Caitlin to take the time from her busy schedule to be here. So, Caitlin, I'm going to turn it over to you. I'm going to stop screen sharing, and hopefully I will get unpinned, and Caitlin will be. There you go, Caitlin.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that lovely introduction and seconded. Thank you everyone for being here. I know it's an incredibly busy time of year at the end of the semester. So hopefully this will be a nice kind of overview, good resources and more kind of things to think about than again, getting beyond those checklists of all the things that we have to do, and more about the why and what's fun and good about the things that we do. So let me move to my slides. So today my presentation is Beyond Checklists, Broadening Access Discussions with Usability and Transparency. Um, so about me, you already have heard my title, but the broad way I introduce my job and my title, which is kind of unique, is I support broadening accessibility and inclusivity of materials and experiences at GW. So I started my career working just with online educators, online only courses, and then I've moved into this role where I talk with faculty across our whole university. Ah, where's my mouse? There it is. So today's agenda, it's split into four sections and they're color coded by section to hopefully keep you on track and keep me on track. We'll start with shifting the frame from compliance to usability. Then I'm going to talk about transparent course design, kind of borrowing from a model I'll talk about that you may or may not be familiar with. Then I'm going to talk about access friction. As much as I like to talk about broadening access, I also want to talk about how complicated it can be. And then some key takeaways and just a little bit of time for us to discuss. There'll be a couple scenarios around the way. So thank you for being here. My objectives for us today is to align the why of the classroom with the how of presenting information. I want us to be able to address barriers for usable design and transparent conversation, and also want us to all acknowledge that inherent friction that can arise when we're addressing needs that can be complicated and changing. So how you can participate today, feel free to just listen or to contribute. Like I said, I'll have a couple scenarios, but happy to guide those through if this is more of a listening day for you. Take breaks as you need. Please let me know if you need something repeated. I tend to talk and try to fit a lot in, so please slow me down if you need. If you want, you can write a parking lot thought or question in the chat as I'm going along, but we're also a smaller group, so feel free to raise your hand or submit in the chat. So, shifting the frame from compliance to usability. So, compliance. Accessibility often becomes centered around compliance. And obviously, there are legal standards that we should and must adhere to. Whether faculty, students, staff know about those things is a different story. I'm sure you may have experienced. GW receives federal funding, most of our colleges do, so we're subject to 504 and the Americans with Disabilities Act. Um, but, and I never want to say that compliance isn't crucial because it is, but it's often when I've been working with faculty, not the most successful route for us to emphasize, not the best way to get through the conversation. And that is for a number of reasons. Faculty can really feel really unprepared if they get noticed that they need to make their materials accessible. They can feel blindsided. And feeling in like legal jeopardy as a frame, even though it's not like you're going to jail or anything like that, but that kind of compliance, you did something wrong discussion can be really uncomfortable, in particular if you were not aware about accessibility. Most of our faculty have not been trained to remediate materials and make them accessible for screen readers. And there can be inherent overwhelm at all there is to fix and meet some long technical checklist of standards. And so I have found in my work that usability is a lot more successful of a frame with faculty and staff when we're trying to address accessibility needs. And this comes from like user experience design and web design, if you're not familiar, but high usability just means the easiest and least labor intensive route to a goal. So if you're doing something on a website, if you're trying to buy something, it should be as frictionless as possible for you to put that in your cart, buy it, and take it with you. Um, and when I talk about this in our teaching, when we teach, we want to get to discussion, we want to get to engagement, we want our students to be talking about the content. And we, as both students and faculty, don't want to be mired in discussions about how we're going to do this. What are the logistics? How do I turn this in? Where are the readings? What are the tools that we're using? It can become, as much as we have many tools to our disposal to do incredible and engaging things, it can often be mired in a lot of complication unnecessarily. So, usability and universal design have really aligned goals. So, we want to reduce barriers and reduce the need for individual requests for accommodation. We want to identify where our students get bogged down and solve those problems through proactive design. We want to clarify our course goals, simplify instruction and activities to achieve those goals, and broadly speaking, create an inclusive and welcoming environment for all of our learners. And so, what we really want to do is reduce barriers and sorry, I can't see my own title. There we go. Reduce barriers and increase usability. So our students want to be able to use their energy to engage with the class and not have to fight for access or ask a lot of questions about how to do things. If you've heard of spoon theory, like we have a certain amount of energy that we have to expend, and our students who might have chronic disability have different levels of energy that they have to expend over a day to come into class and not be able to even access the reading to be able to read it to participate in class is an incredibly frustrating thing to undergo. And on the same token, our faculty also want to focus on teaching the class and engaging with their students thoughtfully and not dealing with a lot of emails and logistical barriers to complete our learning tasks. So, a quick share out, folks here today. If you would you like to share what are barriers expressed by students in your classroom or barriers that you're finding as an instructor? So you can throw that in the chat, and I'm putting the window up so I can see it. I'll just go for like a minute. Navigating the LMS. Yes, information clearly and efficiently on Canvas. Unfamiliarity with learning systems. Oh my gosh, so many Canvas and LMS questions. That's great. Now I'm like, I'll propose my session, which is just about designing Blackboard for Clarity, but I can adapt it for Canvas. Clarity of assignment and instructions, definitely. Oh, how to use a rubric. That's a good one too. We get lots of questions at GW about rubrics and how helpful they are. Is the rubric actually adding unnecessary complexity when we talk about it being something that should be removing complexity from the grading process? Different ways of doing things across different classes, definitely. I talk about like each classroom has its own little kind of micro universe that you have to learn the specific rules of. And I think we underestimate how difficult that transition between different little micro universes and within the college can be. Where to find feedback, how to translate feedback into revisions. These are all great, complicated, and hopefully I'm not going to have specific answers to all these things, but hopefully some ways to frame questions to think about these barriers in a different way. So thank you everyone for sharing. So today I'm talking about something that I don't think I've invented, but I've started talking and broadening this thing that we talk about a lot in GW, transparent assignment design into a more transparent course design. So the guideline that I'm working with today is guideline one, perception. So this is from those guidelines, how might we increase accessibility, flexibility, and diversity in the sharing of information? Consideration 1.1 is support opportunities to customize the display of information, and 1.2 is support multiple ways to perceive information. So I wanted to note, I'm intentionally making overwhelming slides. So I don't want you to read these. There's too much on the slide on purpose. So for both of these considerations, there are a number of things for a faculty member to consider. Um, for eases and time's sake, obviously I won't read through all of them individually, but there are 7 here and no particular kind of guidelines or guidance on resources to get faculty to do all of these things. What does the volume or rate of speech or sound mean? How do I do that? What is an appropriate contrast between background and images? Like this all sounds great and I want to be inclusive, but this is a lot to look at right away. And for the second, perceive information, there are actually 14, which is also a lot. These are written more in like verb form rather than just broad considerations like the first one. But again, 14 different things that if you have never been trained on accessibility, are not sure how screen readers work, are not sure what kind of standards there are for color blindness and things of this nature, looking at your materials, looking at your course experiences and thinking about all of these things off the bat. Like I said, that kind of compliance and checklist lens can be really overwhelming at the start. So intentionally overwhelming slides done. So keeping all of these elements in mind on top of our teaching goals is really overwhelming. And I like to talk about that a lot in my work, that I know how much our faculty are dealing with. I know all of the things that we're trying to do in the classroom. And as much as we have good intentions, it can be really hard to also think about these accessibility things. And hopefully we can move towards more intentional planning, move towards um, kind of proactive design of materials, but often what we're working with is stuff that we already have. How can we adapt it? So I encourage introducing transparency to support that usability I was talking about earlier. So transparent assignment design, if you're not familiar, is from the Transparency in Learning and Teaching Project, or TILT. These links are available in my resource afterward. Um, and the TILT project supports student motivation to complete assignments by making our answers explicit. So we use this framework and have all of our assignments have three components to make these answers clear to our students. So the purpose, why are we doing this assignment? The task, what are you doing in this assignment? And the criteria. So how do you know that you're doing it well? And so I've kind of adapted this to think about your whole course in general and to think about your course materials. I think often we think about the assignments and what they are and what they're doing, and we think about the activities and the tools that we're going to use, but the materials that support these are also really important. So how can we think about these in the context of our teaching goals? So for transparent course design, we think, why are you teaching this? What are your course goals? What's the purpose of the activities, and what's the purpose of our course materials in support of those learning goals? And then what tasks are you as a faculty member performing in the classroom? And then what tasks do you want your students to be able to perform? So what's the criteria? So the criteria for a successful course design, I would argue, this first one is actually from the CAS website. All of our learners are able to access and participate in meaningful, challenging learning opportunities. And I would also argue that our discussions in and out of class are more centered on course content, on analysis, on engagement, and they're not centered on logistics and access. Hopefully, those answers should be more transparent, more clear, so that we're not getting mired in logistics discussions. So some examples, we talked in the barriers, the share out, a lot of people mentioned Canvas and the LMS. In course LMS, our goal, my teaching goal, my learning goal for my students, I want them to come prepared for class discussion on their readings. The purpose of my course LMS in the service of that goal is to provide materials in advance for students. And the tasks that I want my students to do are to access those readings and take notes and be prepared. So how do I structure the course LMS in service of these goals? So the things I can do that are more accessible are, and more usable, organize readings logically by week or alphabetically. I know that sounds like baseline, but I have seen and designed many courses coming in with a reading list in no particular order. So thinking about the ways in which we present our information for our students and segment them so that it's easy for them to find what they need to show up in the particular class that they're coming to. Provide readable readings. So again, with more checklists and accessibility standards, we would want them to go through and do all the PDFs. But an initial first step, I've seen so many scans that are difficult to read. The first good step is just easy to read text visually. So ideally not a scan. Ideally, it's a text where we can see clearly the font and the text on the page. The best, obviously, is that it's readable by a screen reader, that a student can access it with a screen reader. And at my university, I would be the person to kind of put the faculty member in touch to either remediate something that they have or work with a librarian to find a better option. And then for more usability, the task I want my students to do is to be prepared. And for the discussion, I could include discussion questions. I could include highlights of the readings. I could include points that may be challenging. So thinking of how I can provide supports around the tasks and the goals that I want to achieve with my materials, not just with the activity itself, but how do I structure them for success for my students? So let's do an example together. So we'll talk about lecture slides. So a whole I do whole workshops on different types of materials at my institution, and I did this one at Pod just about lecture slides. So there are many purposes for lecture slides. You can think we're just showing stuff, but you could be sharing logistics, like providing an agenda, doing upcoming due dates for your students. You could be explaining concepts like bullet points, quotes, or visuals. You could be providing interactivity, so that could be a place where you're putting discussion questions or polls for your students. And you could be creating a record. So you could be using these slides as a reference for students to have before they come to class or after. And these can bring up different considerations. So in my particular scenario, I've got a slide with a graph. So on the right hand of this slide, there's a graph from a site called Our World in Data, which is a great place to get free graphs, but they're not always color contrast friendly. So this is a graph of the number of people living in urban and rural areas, and there's crossover point where the urban population overtakes the rural population. And so the goal is I want my students to know the story of this graph. I want them to know where that population crossover point changed. The purpose of this slide with this image is to succinctly illustrate this change. So I can talk about it. There could be a lot of reasons why this change is happening, but I kind of want to succinctly illustrate this point. And the task is I want my students to be able to envision this image, to reference it in their future analysis, and recall it on an exam. So with our goal, purpose, and our student tasks in mind, how are some ways that we could broaden access? So you can raise your hand or put things in the chat. Give us another like 30, 40 seconds and see what you guys think. What are things we could do with this slide to broaden access in service of our goals? Yes, Misty, slide should have alt text for the chart. So I will add a complication there, thinking about how you're using the slides. If you're only using them in class, you're not going to provide the file to your students. Um, you wouldn't necessarily need to expend energy to write those alt texts for the charts. So that's something to keep in mind too. Increasing the size and color contrast, having print copies available, that's great. The caption from Meg, these are all great. Give it another 20 seconds. All right. So you guys came up with a couple that I didn't, but some ways to broaden slide and image access. So the first one is narrating the image aloud for students in class. This is something that I often talk about as like an easy kind of, well, not easy, but something that once you get into the practice and the habit of doing, it becomes easier. Often, if I go to like a class observation or see someone do a workshop, they kind of let a slide sit on the screen and never address it, or an image sit on screen and not address what they're trying to include or make important about that image. So narrating the image aloud and saying what the story is and why you included it is helpful again to get your students, your audience to attend to the thing that you're trying to get them to attend to. By adding automated captioning to your slides to support the textual version of your narration in class. So we're here in Zoom, so you've got captions in Zoom if you need them. Adding a summary slide of points for students to remember. So you could show the image and talk about it, but then have a summary slide after in text. Um, Writing a description in the LMS or lecture notes. So thinking about not only the one modality that we're thinking about, but the other places we have in our class. So if this is a really important point you want your students to know, it should maybe exist in another place as well. So thinking about putting that description somewhere else for students to have it in like a reference and a study guide. And then narrowing the scope. You'll note I was showing a big graph that had a long line, and really I'm only talking about a small portion of it. So highlighting that area of note with a box or zooming in on it is another way to kind of focus the attention to the particular thing that I'm trying to get attention to. And then, so just going back to some questions that can help guide you as you're thinking about your materials, going back to the what, the why, and the how. What are you planning to do in your classroom or in your LMS or in your Zoom session? And why are you approaching it this way? So I think before we get into all the checklists of what you can do with color contrasts and fonts and images and all of these things that can overwhelm, I think we need to have some initial discussions of kind of what are the things that you would like to do and why? And how can we make that then maximally usable to your students? And how can you support multimodality in that effect? So, how can you have things that are visual, but also have them in text? And again, where are you sharing them? Are these slides just existing like mine are now, where you can see them and I'm narrating them? You have the benefit of me here to explain them to you, but they're also being recorded. So you're getting my audio here, which will also be in the transcript. But I also have slide notes. So if you looked at just my slides and didn't come today, you get some of this content in the slide notes as well. How can you communicate transparently to students about the why and how can they get support? So you can make these choices in your classroom, but then how are you taking the next step to tell your students, well, we're using this tool because of this, or I am wanting you to do the assignment in Google Docs so that we can do this interaction with each other. So not just kind of sharing what you're doing, but the why. And also, if that is confusing to your students or if they need some extra help about those logistics, where are the channels that they can get support? So, do they come to office hours? Do they send you an email? How do they kind of communicate that back to you? And in general, simpler is better. So I hope my slides are modeling this as well. Text should be easy to read, so that can be a first hurdle to clear. Is it should not be super small. It should be light background, dark, or dark background with light. We'll talk a little bit about that in our next scenario. Using consistent templates. So in our LMS, each folder for each week of the course is structured in a similar way, or for our slides, we use a similar slide deck structure where every deck has an agenda and it has a takeaway question at the end, and it's divided into sections. So it's consistent and our students know what to expect. I never want to say you can't use images. Including relevant, impactful images, I think can be really great. But I'm finding a lot, I'm working with faculty who are getting templates from places like Canva or places on the internet that have like lots of extra like widgety, pretty images that actually can distract from your learning message. So thinking about how are you using the real estate of a slide deck or the real estate of your course LMS, and what's there that is impactful and what could be distracting to students. So thinking about the ways that we use images and how we can, again, broaden access, make sure that those have alt text and that we're describing them and choosing them thoughtfully. Making directions straightforward. The biggest like tool I have in my toolbox for that is my colleagues at the teaching center is we do a lot of reading and passing back and forth of things to see if they're clear. If you are a person who uses generative AI tools, this is something that we've worked with some of our faculty who are comfortable with that, is putting your assignment directions and saying what questions might a student have about this assignment. And you might get some interesting answers there. Some that might help you and some that might be not helpful. Also, tools like Grammarly, again, if you're comfortable, can help you to kind of shorten and tighten up the language if that could be helpful for you. But I always recommend if you've got a teaching center, there are people there who would love to read it and give you some feedback. And then highlighting the pathways for help and feedback. So again, making clear your office hours. Would you prefer an email? Is there a discussion board where questions should be going? Making those pathways for our students clear so that they can give you feedback to get some help. So my final piece today is talking a little bit about access friction. So conflicting needs could complicate things. So, planning your course design and thinking through multiple modalities and best practices is wonderful. However, you can't always plan ahead for every need. Sometimes there are design choices that you make as a faculty member that are less supportive of that kind of real-time adaptation. So it's nice here in Zoom to have automated captions that can bring up the text that I'm speaking on screen. But if you plan and make an alt text caption in a different place and it doesn't quite work for somebody, not as supportive of that real-time adaptation. And strategies that help some people succeed might cause barriers for others or be difficult to manage. So again, Zoom is great because you can toggle captions on or off, but in a classroom setting, if I have the ability to send a survey ahead of time, or I'll ask right before I start my presentation if folks would like automated captions. For some folks, automated captions can be really distracting and take focus away, and it's too much text on screen for them to have a running text underneath, especially if it's not super accurate automated captions. But when you're a faculty member at the front of the room, you kind of have to make a binary choice, captions on or captions off. So those things can be difficult. So I wanted to kind of address that in design, as we're doing this kind of transparent course design, there may come things that are difficult to handle. So we're going to do a little scenario, dark mode and light mode. So the scenario, you are demonstrating a software program in class to your students using your defaulted light mode. After class, one student requests that you consider doing future demonstrations in dark mode. They have light sensitivity and dark mode is easier for them to read. You agree to the change and in your next class you use dark mode, but then after that class, a different student reports that they have astigmatism and dark mode creates a haloing effect that makes text fuzzy and harder for them to read. So my questions for you are, how would you make a decision about which mode to use to demonstrate in class moving forward, and what factors could come into play? And what are possible accommodations that could be made for students who prefer the alternate mode? So you can raise a hand, you can ask questions in the chat, have the chat on screen. Misty, great solution. You could have a recording with a different mode than you present in and have it available ahead of time. Students that prefer alt mode could use their own device. Have students look at the software on their own devices and follow along. Very good. Written instructions with screenshots in both modes. Very good. Yeah, these are all great solutions to something where there initially seems like I can only make a binary choice, right? But you all are demonstrating how creative we can be and thinking of different accommodations that we can do. In terms of like my one choice for demonstrating in the front of the class, because our second student has something that makes the text fuzzy and harder to read, I probably would stick to light mode, but maybe because of the light sensitivity, I would maybe lower the lights in the classroom or talk with that student about, again, having them look in dark mode. So um, my next slide is kind of how do you handle that thing? So first is ask your students. So in my takeaway document, I didn't want to put too much text on screen. I have a number of questions about usability and accessibility that you can ask your students. So things like, do you want slides with a dark background or a light background? If that's something as faculty member that you're ready to make a change on. And you can do it in a survey, in a quiz. You could do it in a an exit ticket, like a note card. You'll see I have lots and lots of questions. Do not ask all of them at once, but think of maybe one or two questions across the semester. So there are questions like, how is the pace of class? Are the visuals in the class helping you understand the material? Are there things I could do to broaden access? So in my takeaway document, asking your students can be really helpful. And same, like, do you want to have captions in the class? Would that be a helpful support for you? prepare for multiple modalities. So as you all said in the chat, preparing documents or preparing to let students know I'm going to present in light mode. So if you prefer to view in dark mode, maybe bring your own devices and walk along with me on your own device rather than looking at the front. So kind of preparing and thinking about those things in advance. And then comparing the size and severity of need. This can be hard to do, but again, thinking through if the text is so fuzzy that the student can't read it, then we need to think about how we can accommodate the first student. So thinking about the severity of the need too. And it can be complicated. We want to embrace variability, generally speaking, but that can bring up things that can be difficult. But we have the tools in our toolbox. Again, thinking back to the why are we doing things, how are we doing things, and how can we adapt them to our students' needs. So any questions before I do key takeaways? I left a lot of space for questions.
Feel free
Thank
to
you, Diane.
yeah, feel free to unmute and ask
Mhm.
questions if you have one. We'd love to hear or any comments on what you've tried even, based on some of what Caitlin, we'd love to hear what you're thinking. It's a wonderfully small group in all the best ways, so this is an opportunity to really interact and ask those questions.
Yeah, and I can pull down my slides for a little bit too.
Yeah. So please feel free to unmute and ask away or type in the chat.
Yes. Yeah, Meg, how might you tactfully determine severity of need when you do have two students with conflicting needs, like in your previous example? That is an excellent question. So, definitely having those individual discussions, obviously not trying to have those, having those discussions with students individually and not in the context of the large class. So, if we're having like a conflicting access need that's happening in class, kind of making sure, okay, let's take time. I'll talk with each of you separately about your needs. And then, yeah, kind of tactfully going through is this like causing extreme discomfort to have like the light sensitivity? Are there things we could do with like the window shade? Are there things that we could do like sunglasses or like folks were saying if printed materials or on your own device would be easier? So kind of thinking through those discussions and preparing for those discussions too. I think that's one where you want to like write your questions out ahead of time and be ready to kind of to ask the students some things that might feel complicated. Also, talking with your folks at your disability support services office if they have resources or thoughts about how they could help you as well. Even if a student doesn't have a formalized accommodation, I have built relationships with that office so that if I have a question where there's a student who doesn't have a formal relationship with that office but seems like they could use some accessibility support, what are the tools that we have available to us? So, great question. It's really difficult, but keeping those conversations sensitive and private and not happening in the class, but inside of like office hours or an email or meeting would be best. Rob.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Caitlin. I was just thinking more recently, I've been thinking about like screen readers and just how we use headings and also avoiding using colors with headings. So, can you say more about that? Just, just thinking, taking perspective of if someone were to take a document that I was creating to make sure that a screen reader could read the title, the headings, eliminate colors, or any other tips that you may have as well. So that's kind of my thing that I'm thinking about, just trying to be sensitive to folks who use that, who use screen readers.
Absolutely. So, using those built-in headings and not just styling your text with bolds or making your text larger is my first thing, is even if the text looks the same, it should be tagged as a header. So that is the first thing. And a big thing that's kind of underdone, I feel like a lot of faculty provide their documents to students in PDF form. But it's really great if you can and feel comfortable for you to provide the original editable documents to your students, because then they can make the text bigger, they can make highlights, they can make comments on their own. And I think there seems to be sometimes kind of like resistance to providing that editable document. I think there might be like concerns that a student might say, like, put something in the syllabus or a due date that doesn't exist or something like that. But I really want to like think the best for our students and enable them to adapt the documents as easily as possible for themselves. And the same thing for slides as well, if that's something that you're comfortable giving to your students so that they could transform it to dark mode and be able to see them. I know that's not always in our capability because we're maybe making materials right before class happens, but I really suggest if we can provide editable documents to our students that we do, because they're much easier to work with than PDFs, and cause a lot fewer problems than PDFs.
Yeah, thank you. That was a good point. I was thinking about that too, as a sort of a dilemma. I was going to put your slides into a PDF, but then your link there, and I saw your notes, and then you highlighted that in the beginning. So just, yeah, so sometimes we want to, I know, put them in a PDF so then they can't be altered, but then, to your point, then it's more difficult for them to access them if they want to, manipulate them. Yeah.
So
Yeah, PDFs are great for visual consistency, and that's what they're designed for. The actual information consistency is where the problems come in. So, yeah, Diana.
so sort of pushing back on that a little bit. With most PDF readers now, with most programs, you can adjust the fonts, you can do all that, the size, you can copy stuff out. So I guess I'm like six of one and half a dozen of the other to me, right? At least that's what I'm seeing. And a screen reader, again, assuming your document is set up appropriately with the headings, PDF can easily be read by a screen reader. So I'm like, I don't know that there is an advantage because you can mark them up, you can do notes, you can do everything right in, on your screen.
Yeah, PDF, like Adobe and PDF readers have gotten more functional, but especially I just find like, especially for like syllabus documents, I find with that amount of text, adapting them in Word to be easier. But PDF readers and have gotten a lot better for sure.
Yeah, yeah, and even with a syllabus, depending on how it's set up, to the point that you made, if you are using the appropriate headings and so forth, and making sure that if you have any figures in there, that they're captured, all of the things that lead to accessibility would be really important. Um,
Definitely.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. But I have found sometimes in the transfer from Word to PDF, some of those things can get lost if they're not transferred appropriately. If you print as a PDF instead of save as a PDF, a lot of those features go away, which some folks don't always know about. So, yeah,
yeah. Always
for
test.
sure.
I guess my
Always
rules are
test.
always test, always test.
Definitely. Definitely.
Anybody else have questions or thoughts or comments about what has been presented or how you've even experienced it personally? I do have one question. Well, if
Yeah.
nobody else is. Um, so the whole idea of and I have never, this is something I create my own PDFs, but of tagging PDFs.
Mhm.
Um, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, about like ways to learn to tag PDFs.
Yeah, and just the importance of that as well, right? Because it is important, right? Yeah.
Very important. Yeah.
Yeah, since we got off on
So
PDFs.
yeah, since we got off on PDFs for sure. There are more at least as a start, automatic tagging tools. If your university has Adobe Acrobat, there's automatic tagging there, which is a helpful start. But going through the accessibility panel in PDF and tagging and looking at all the tags and that your headers are in the correct order and that headers are tagged correctly. Sometimes like it'll tag bolded text that isn't necessarily a header just because it's bold in that automatic tagging. It's called walking the tag tree, or that's how some people call it, is kind of walking through the tags in your document and seeing that they're showing up appropriately and using the reading order tool that things are falling in the right order for the screen reader as well. I'll add this to my document, but there's a really great if your campus has LinkedIn Learning, there's a really great LinkedIn Learning about PDF tagging that is very user friendly, includes documents for you to practice tagging. So that's where, if I have faculty who are interested in learning about that process, that's where I direct them at GW, and I'm happy to provide that link as well. It's a really, really great resource, and there are lots of like YouTube videos about tagging too. So there, I can try to find some open resources too. But that one course is really, really, really useful, and yeah, just providing that kind of metadata that helps guide the screen reader through the process. Yeah, through the document.
Great, because I know that we have some faculties are using a lot of open resources, and not all PDFs that they're putting up are accessible, and not just accessible to a student who might actually absolutely need the screen reader, but to for our student population in particular, busy people who just would rather listen than read
Hmm.
because, their child is sick, they're changing a diaper, because we have all adults do.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, our there was advocacy from our students to turn Blackboard Ally into opt out instead of opt in. So all of our documents are able to go through a screen reader process. But that being said, I was really happy about that advocacy moment. But if those PDFs aren't tagged, there's nothing in there for the screen reader to read. So it's really crucial that those PDFs are run through OCR, through optical character recognition, so that they recognize there is text in that PDF for it to read as a first step. And then the next steps that headings are tagged appropriately, images have alt text in them too. So it's yeah, screen reader usage is not just, nor has it ever been just for folks who have visual impairments. It's also for other folks who prefer to intake information that way. So my other big thing for readings is, as much as like learning to tag PDFs is great, working with your librarians is amazing because they often can find web-based or HTML-based versions of readings that you have. We have And they also have better scanners. So if they are scanning a chapter of a book, they will have like an optical character recognition scanner that can make a more accessible scan for you. So really partnering with your librarians to find the readings that your institution may have subscriptions to, and you might be like making a photocopy in your office where you could link students directly to a more accessible PDF is my other big thing. I'm always sending folks to the library to work with them because they can actually, at our university anyway, the librarians can link the readings in their course for them, so they don't even have to take that step. So finding those partnerships as well to work with the folks who have like the keepers of the documents is also a great thing to do.
Yeah, so if you could share the tagging, that would be great, the tagging resources, because I know some faculty have struggled with that. That would be great.
Definitely. Yeah, it takes practice. I've taught and retaught people a lot about tagging. It's complicated. Especially footnote tagging. Oh my gosh. Very, very complicated. Doable, but complicated.
All right. Other questions, comments, thoughts, sharings, that people have? We'd love to hear from you. Okay. I know. I think everybody's pretty quiet, exhausted,
Yeah, that's all right. It's
exhausted end of
December
semester,
17th.
right?
It's
Exhausted. Hi,
December
Maria.
17th.
Yeah.
Exhausted. So I'll do my last takeaway slides. They're really short. So if you don't remember anything today, transparency and clarity of purpose can guide your design decisions. So as you're thinking about what you need to do with your documents, thinking about how you can be transparent about what you're trying to do and be um, as direct as possible. Think not only if something is able to be accessed, but if it's maximally usable for everyone in the classroom. Designing and providing access is not always straightforward. And if you're not sure, you should ask. So some resources to take, they've been putting my link in the chat. I also made a little bit.ly, um, if I can get the link to copy myself, broaden access resource. I'll copy it. It includes a link to these slides. It includes these key takeaways. It includes that question to ask students and some resources and references. Oh, so hopefully it'll open there. So it looks like this. So some questions to guide course design. Here are the things you could put in a survey to ask your students, and then some resources of where I found things. And I'll add that tagging link into there too. So thank you so much. And please feel free to connect with me. I know this is like a short presentation, but you can email me at any time, cbcrane@gw.edu, my maiden name, easier to spell than Savoldelli. Um, and I'm also on LinkedIn if you want to find me there. But thank you so much for having me. And I hope you all have a wonderful and restful end to your academic year. And hopefully, some things for you to take away today. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much. This was great. Really, really great. Great presentation style, great slides, great resources, good
Thank
tip.
you.
We love at Goodwin, we love Tilt. So, that so
Yeah, we're big Tilt fans.
yeah, huge Tilt fans. So really, really great information. I have to say, Caitlin, this yours is one of the best
Oh, thank you
presentations.
so
Yeah,
much.
I did I say that out loud? I did. No, I think it's really usable and really gets to the heart of um, ensuring that students have access into the information, if they can't get into it and a pathway into the learning, then we're really not doing a good job. So we really have to give them, and to your point that you made, not every student has an accommodation. Not every student is going to say, I really don't have time to read, but I could listen. And so if we make sure we give them options, and that they're, uh, that we just can be so much better at what we do. So we really appreciate it. Other
Thank
comments
you.
from my colleagues, from any of the people who are here in this session? Um,
Yeah, thanks for all the thank yous, everyone, as you leave.
Yeah, Caitlin, it's Rob. I love the conversations that you have with students, and I think that's an area to kind of build on, when you come up with those different options, or just to have an open conversation and ask students. And I think that's a huge takeaway. Not to kind of do, usability behind the scenes or do it, when you need to, but really kind of open it up as part of the learning process. And that's something that I think is really helpful for our faculty.
yeah.
Absolutely. I think we as people who work in academia represent often like our the best students, the people who are the outcome of the process, who it was successful for. So when we design learning experiences, we can kind of design with assumptions about what students can do or what the answers are for them. When really it's better to ask them what they need because they're coming in newer and newer every year with new skills, new questions, new things that they like and prefer. So if we can ask them, that's a good practice to get in the habit of. I think always with the thing that I'm always trying, I'm always learning. I might not get the answers right away, but anything you tell me this semester, I know will make things better this semester and any future semesters too. So the more
Yeah.
you can ask
Yeah.
your students and involve them, I'm totally on board for that.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. Thank you. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Any other thoughts? All right. Well, I think that does it then. So again, we really appreciate you giving us your time. I know this is just incredibly busy time of year for all kinds of reasons and um in our personal lives, in our work lives. So I really am grateful to have had you today, Caitlin, and good on GW for having you there. So thank you again, and
Thank you.
thanks to all our participants. And the recording will get up on YouTube, so you'll have that to refer back to. So thank you very much, everybody, and enjoy what is a semester break for most people. And Happy New Year, right? That's coming
Yeah.
up. Yeah. All
My
right.
gosh, 2026. Crazy.
It is crazy. 10 years that we've been doing UDL, so it is crazy. So thank you
Amazing.
so much. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.